The world of Star Wars is filled with a myriad of fantastical alien races that come in all shapes and sizes. However, few have managed to captivate the attention of the audience and the denizens of the galaxy quite like the Twi'lek. This humanoid alien species is one of the most noticeable races across the galaxy. From Jedi Knights to Sith Lords, they've played a major role in shaping the destiny of this intricate world crafted by George Lucas. However, despite many of the key figures in this expansive saga belonging to this race, the Twi'leks as a species have not enjoyed the same level of respect or influence. They're often associated with slavery and objectification, being treated as mere commodities for the rich and the affluent to flaunt. So what's the reason behind this attitude towards them, and what is their place within the galaxy far, far away? I'll be discussing all of these and more in today's video. I'll be using both the canon and legends lore in this video, depending on what's more interesting storytelling-wise. This video will also contain some minor lore spoilers, so be warned. With that out of the way, join me as I explore the biology and culture of the Twi'leks, the most exploited species in the galaxy. Let's begin. So what actually makes a Twi'lek a Twi'lek? It's difficult to precisely pinpoint one single thing that makes a race what it is. This is the case with the Twi'lek as well. You might be familiar with them as the beautiful, near-human race that seems to adorn the cantinas across the galaxy. However, to define them by this would be a gross disservice to them. Before I begin diving deep into their place in the world of Star Wars, I'd like to begin talking about some of the fundamental things that define a Twi'lek, starting with their home world. You probably first encountered them, like me, as dancers in Jabba the Hutt's personal palace. Just like most of their kin spread around the galaxy, the Twi'lek all come from the planet in the outer rim called Ryloth. Theirs is a harsh world with a variety of flora and fauna, all of which will kill you. As if this wasn't enough by itself, the terrain that's home to these things and the Twi'lek is equally varied and abrasive. According to legends, the world of Ryloth has one side facing the sun perpetually, while the other is steeped in darkness. The Twi'lek live in the twilight region of the planet, which is a narrow band that divides Ryloth, where conditions are fairly manageable. This has resulted in the Twi'lek developing distinct anatomical features that set them apart quite distinctly from the rest of the species that we see in the Star Wars franchise. You absolutely cannot miss those tails coming out of the crown of their heads or the exotic colors of their skin. I'll be expanding on the function behind both these things as the video goes on. However, what defines a Twi'lek is not just their exotic features, the harsh planet they hail from, or even the way they're viewed by most of the galaxy's population. Their legacy is defined by oppression under various regimes, exploitation, courage, and their eventual rise to reclaim their rightful place as a respected people beyond the horrors of their past. To be a Twi'lek, therefore, is to be a survivor. How does their biology feed into their culture? It's not always unusual for the biology of a species to feed into their culture. There are many examples of it, not just in Star Wars, but also in other fantasy works involving fictional races. What I can safely say, though, is that none of these races has its biology tied to its culture quite as literally as the Twi'lek. The head tails that they possess, which have often garnered them some unsavory nicknames, like tailheads, are an integral part of their culture because they play a huge role in the way they communicate and express their emotions. These head tails are actually called the Lekku by the Twi'leks. They use these Lekku to form different signs in conjunction with whatever they're speaking to deliver the meaning behind their words. For instance, during several tense moments involving Hera Syndulla in the Star Wars Rebels series, we see her Lekku held rigid or moving. During the Clone Wars, when we're introduced to Numa and the rest of the Twi'leks in the Innocence of Ryloth episode, we get to see a close-up of how their Lekku react to their various emotions. Official lore confirms Lekku-based communication, though there isn't a fully mapped fan-usable gesture dictionary on screen. Regardless, their impact on Twi'lek culture is unmistakable. Therefore, in the wider galaxy, this has been fetishized by many people who view Twi'leks as mere trophies. They interpret the Lekku to be a sexual ornament of sorts, perhaps due to just how sensitive these appendages are. Of course, most of such assumptions are born out of speculation and bigotry, but it's sad to see it happen nonetheless. Also, it's speculated that when Twi'leks get drunk, their Lekku turns green. Just another way in which their biology is tied to their drinking culture, perhaps. What are Lekku actually for? Biology of the headtails. Having just covered the way in which the Lekku play a pivotal role in the Twi'lek culture, let's move on and discuss their more practical use. Like all species, Twi'leks have also evolved over the course of their species' long history to adapt to their environments. Ryloth is not exactly a Naboo, if you know what I mean, and while it also might not be Dathomir, living on it is no easy task. According to legends, the Twi'lek suffered the agony of almost never having the requisite nutrition to sustain them. Despite their somewhat slender frames, this race was known to have a multi-chambered stomach. Further, due to Ryloth's hostile conditions, growing food was next to impossible, and so was hunting. This meant that the Twi'leks needed to evolve in a way that they would be able to store large quantities of sustenance from which their bodies would be able to draw nourishment over time. While we humans store excess food by converting it into fats that spread into layers across our bodies, the Twi'leks store their fat in their Lekku. According to some sources, the Lekku also plays a key role in maintaining the center of balance for a Twi'lek, not to mention that they are also considered an erogenous region. Did you know that the Twi'lek actually have a common name for their two Lekkus? They call the left Lekku Chun and the right one Chin. In fact, Twi'leks rarely refer to their headtails as Lekku. Instead, they either use the word Chun Chin or one of the two. Why do Twi'leks come in so many colors? The Twi'leks are arguably the most multicolored species in the entire galaxy, and I mean this quite literally. They come in almost every single hue you can think of, from blue, pink, tan, green, to even red on rarer occasions. Their skin color is more than just cosmetic in nature, as it signifies a lot of things from their race, social hierarchy, and the way the wider galaxy views them. There are also some practical reasons for them having developed such pigmentations on their skin. The Twi'leks evolved in such a way that they developed skin colors that help dissipate heat. Their skin also aided in camouflaging them on the various terrains of their homeworld. This theory ties their evolution directly to their survival on Ryloth. The other theory takes a genetic approach to things. It states that the Twi'leks' colors signify which clan or subclan they belong to. It's a way of social demarcation within their own society. There are also Twi'leks that have developed mutations that grant them certain types of phenotypes on their skin. The most common type of Twi'lek we see in Star Wars is the Russian Twi'lek, which refers to those with blue skin tone. Notable names in this category are Aayla Secura, the Jedi Master who served as general during the Clone Wars, Senator of the Galactic Republic Orn Free Taa. These are only some examples of Russian Twi'leks. Moving to the opposite side of the spectrum, there are the Lethan Twi'leks with their red skin tone. Considered to be the rarest color among the Twi'lek, they are coveted as slaves across the galaxy for this reason. The most famous example of a Lethan Twi'lek is, however, no slave. In fact, it's someone that most people would avoid at all costs. That individual is Darth Talon, a female Sith Lord who was an apprentice to none other than the legendary Darth Krayt. The colors of the Twi'lek have, in general, unfortunately contributed to their objectification throughout the galaxy. It's added to this notion of them being exotic, despite their numbers being quite widespread across all planets. They do say that 1 in every million Twi'lek is born a Lethan, but this could be mere exaggeration told by the slavers to increase their commodities value. I say this because we see a fair amount of Lethans in both the canon and especially the legends. Unfortunately, not all of them possess the notoriety of being a Sith and therefore fall as easy victims to these unsavory individuals who view them as nothing but things. Why are Twi'leks the galaxy's go-to slaves and dancers? The Twi'leks were considered the go-to slaves and dancers in the galaxy because this was an idea that they kind of perpetuated themselves. Slavery was the primary means of transaction in Ryloth, as several of the Twi'leks were sold into servitude by either their own kin or captured by the Hutts. Seeing there to be little of value to trade on their homeworld, this was the logical conclusion that many of them arrived at. In fact, the event had an adage which stated something along the lines that it was better to endure the storm and survive than to stand up against it and be blown away. This led to Twi'lek society developing a mindset through which they didn't tackle any hard-hitting issues plaguing them. Even though they also had a rich history of warriors and fighters, they were the exception, not the norm. We had the likes of Darth Talon, Aayla Secura, Hera Syndulla, Bib Fortuna, and Orn Free Taa, who were powerful individuals in their own spaces. Unfortunately, their species was defined owned by the majority of them, who were taken by slavers or used as exotic dancers. The females of their race were especially coveted because they could breed with other species like humans. The likes of Bib Fortuna show the internalization of this slave mindset perpetuated by their own people. Despite being a Twi'lek, he was a major domo of Jabba the Hutt's crime syndicate. He played an active role in the enslavement of his own people. And unfortunately, this was the reality for many Twi'leks. While the Republic no doubt ignored this grave issue, and the slavers did exploit them, they never fought back against it until much later. Further, it was their own people who gave into it and sold their kin for either survival or sustenance. These conditions, along with the exaggerated social stereotypes about their exotic nature, contributed to them being the go-to slaves and dancers across the galaxy. What kind of world creates this much suffering? You must be wondering what kind of world creates this much suffering for the people that dwell on it. Ryloth is a world that has little to offer its denizens in terms of sustenance and trade. Thanks to the hostile environment, the Twi'leks can barely practice agriculture or even go hunting. In fact, they are easy prey to the likes of the Gutkur, whose favorite choice of meal could also be taken to be a Twi'lek. Under such conditions, most members of their race were forced to move to other worlds in search of a better life. As communities of Twi'leks began to form across the various planets in the galaxy, they steadily understood that there was a certain allure that other species had towards their females. This led to them engaging in the slave trade by pawning their own kin to rich merchants and other affluent individuals and establishments. These were done so under the guise of a loosely pinned contract to bypass the anti-slavery law, but no one was under the illusion of what they actually entailed. Before long, trafficking their own kind became a legitimate business among the Twi'lek. This, of course, attracted the attention of the criminals across the world, as such activities tend to. Due to its nature, the substance was banned by the Republic, but still managed to find a healthy demand within the black market. Now, the Twi'leks were either being shipped off as exotic commodities across the galaxy, or being used as indentured labor in the mines by the various criminal organizations. The Republic, despite its righteous bluster, did next to nothing to alleviate the conditions of the Twi'lek. How did the Twi'leks show resistance and agency? The history of Twi'leks' resistance and the reclamation of their agency cannot be traced back to one single event. Instead, it's comprised of numerous events that span across numerous years. We've already discussed how the Twi'leks were initially oppressed by their own kind, followed by the crime syndicates. Despite being part of the Republic, it was largely ignored by the bureaucrats and rulers of the galaxy. Towards the later days of the Republic, a so-called separatist movement begins under the umbrella of a group called the Confederacy of Independent Systems. This group, led by Count Dooku, comprised various organizations like the Trade Federation, the Techno Union, and the Banking Clan, and believed that the Republic had become rotten at its core. They wanted to, therefore, separate from the Republic and form their own government. What most of them didn't know was that they were being used as pawns by Darth Sidious to destabilize the Republic and the Jedi. Thus, the Clone Wars began, which was a civil war within the Galactic Republic between these two factions. Naturally, the effects of the war were felt in Ryloth as well, where a charismatic leader called Sham Syndulla had emerged. Despite many of the Twi'leks wanting to side with the CIS due to their shared view of the Republic's decay, Sham led a strong resistance against the Separatists. Thanks to the aid of the Master Mace Windu, Sham is able to free his people from the clutches of the Separatists, and for a brief moment, the Twi'leks regain their agency. Under the Emperor's Iron Fist, not only do the Twi'leks' conditions revert back to the old ways, but they become even worse. Fortunately, Sham Syndulla continues to organize a resistance to push back these new oppressors called the Free Ryloth Movement. Eventually, he would pass on the torch to his daughter, Hera Syndulla, who would carry on his noble efforts. Hera not only becomes a key figure in the Rebel Alliance, but also a pillar of light for her people to rally towards. She rises to the position of a general in the Rebel forces and plays a major role in leading the Rebels and the Twi'leks in their fight against the Galactic Empire. After the fall of the Empire, the Twi'leks would finally reclaim much of their agency, even though the stereotypes against them wouldn't vanish overnight, nor would the slavery. These things had been built over generations and would require an equal amount of time, if not more, to be abolished completely. Which is why I say that the Twi'leks movement for freedom is one that is a struggle spanning across worlds and generations. The Twi'leks' journey is one of internalized systemic oppression over generations, fueled by stereotypes, objectification, and neglect by those in power. However, I believe their story is not defined by these things. Instead, the Twi'leks' legacy is one of endurance, resilience, and fortitude. Forged under the harsh conditions of their homeworld and made to live in a society that views them as mere objects, Twi'leks are the quintessential survivors. Their generational struggle to reclaim their destiny rings true to everything that Star Wars as a series represents. So guys, who is your favorite Twi'lek? Leave a comment below. For now though, it's time for me to say goodbye. I hope to see you soon in the next one. Till then, stay safe and stay marvelous.